Ek wil open met gebed vanoggend, en as ek vra dat julle ook aansluit. O Vader wat in die hemel is, baie dankie dat ons hier mag wees, om hierdie wonderlike aarde van ons te beleef, en dat U die geleentheid vir ons gegee het om hierdie aarde te verwerk. Ja Vader, dankie vir die talent, en dat U die talent vir ons gegee het, en help ons om hierdie talent te gebruik, tot voordeel van almal wat hier op aarde is. O Vader, ons weet, ons het baie bekommernisse oor die klimaat, oor pryse, oor kostes. O Vader, maar dankie dat ons mag weet dat U die hand van beskerming oor ons hou, en dat U daar is vir ons, en ons moet net vra om vir U hulp. Seën ook die verrigtinge vir die res van die dag. Amen. OK, nou ja, ons het, ek wil net my papier kry. Ek wil net my so bietjie vroeër begin. So ja, jy weet, gister het ons natuurlik die, sê weer? Oh, ja. So, last night, amazing awards that we, it was absolutely great to see the awards and the people that won it. But I was amazed, but I was also disappointed. Okay. And I tell you why, because I just want to go back to my slide, because I tried my best, absolute best. Okay. And myself and ChatGPT, we are good friends. And so I wanted to make the most amazing potato. Now, the problem with this potato is that, as you can imagine, you can't get it off the field, right? And nobody wants to buy this potato. You can just imagine at Woolworths getting a potato like this, how are you going to get it home? Anyway, but as I say, a bit of disappointment, but I'm going to try. Next year, I'll do my best to produce something that's maybe a bit smaller. But I want to talk about innovation before the panel starts. And there's a lot of discussion. And the prize, the potato winner of the year talked about excellence and discipline. And discipline is about operational excellence, is doing everything at the right time, in the right way. That's discipline. That is operational excellence. And innovation is not, okay, let me try this quickly and let me try that quickly, etc. That's what we call gambling. So let's put a bit more of hard chemicals here and let's see how it goes. Let's put a bit of less of this, etc., etc. That's gambling. And innovation is process. Okay, so that operational excellence is do what you do it well, and that brings the profits of today. Operational excellence brings the profits of today. Innovation excellence brings the profits of the future. How does it work? Okay, you can't innovate every day. There's a lot of wording here. Let's innovate. Let's innovate. Let's innovate. Innovation needs the right time and the right process. Now, what you see in front of you is a process. It's a journey. Innovation is a journey. And you go onto this journey, and this journey that you see in front of you is a journey of 20 weeks. You package innovation in a time frame. Every couple of years, you really go for deep innovation. Otherwise, every day you try and improve. It's fantastic. But innovation needs specific time. And that starts with full steam ahead, where you're saying, why am I going to innovate? What am I looking for? And in this full steam ahead, you're putting together your team, the people, the suppliers, people that you work with, to say, here's the reason why I want to innovate. I want to increase my yields by 20%. I want to double my profits. Big goals, not small goals, big goals, right? Put your team together and everybody is aligned with the mission that you have, then you're going to observe and learn. And this is the biggest area that most people miss. We are all solution orientated. We have a problem, 'n boer maak 'n plan. We want to solve certain problems. Okay. But what you first got to do is you've got to look up, see the world, see technology. And this is what this Congress is for. It's for us to look up and to observe and learn. You're not going to make a lot of decisions here at the Congress. You are observing and learning. You are identifying your unique frictions. What are your top 5 frictions? Where do you need to innovate? Where are the innovation opportunities? What technologies are out there? Hard chemicals, biochemicals, everybody is talking, and that is just you listening. Listening. Observing and learning is not making decisions. And now, after you've had the opportunity to observe and learn, now you're ready for raising ideas. And you raise many ideas. So a good innovation, and I'm talking about your whole operation, because you're not talking about one specific thing that you're going to innovate. You're looking at the top 5 things that you want to solve. And therefore you are raising hundreds of ideas. If you are doing a good observe and learn, you'll be able to raise many, many ideas. You can see here, many of these assignments got 500 to 750 ideas. Now, that's how 964 ideas look like. It sounds impossible, but to have a great idea, a good idea, you have to start with many ideas. And you know what? Many of those 964 ideas were terrible ideas. But we're interested in the good ideas. And what we do is we take a good idea and a bad idea and we put it together, and it's a brilliant idea. The next phase is, all right, now I have taken all these ideas. I've got a couple of concepts. I'm going to try these 12 things that I want to really try. I want to experiment a bit. Now is the time for experimentation. After you've really narrowed it down and you test these ideas, you test them, and then after testing them, you can come to the homecoming where you finally say, listen, I've tested my ideas. Some of these ideas are working well, and I'm going to implement them in my operation. And that's the process of innovation. See it as a journey. You don't get into somebody's office after a weekend and say, listen, I have this wonderful idea that I got at a barbecue or a braai, and I think we should be doing this. That's not innovation. Because you are just somebody's busy typing away, and he's busy with his WhatsApp. You've got to create the time for innovation. You've got to create the time for the process. All right, we'll be talking about innovation forever. So we're now going to talk about logistics and the value chain optimization. And reducing the cost of the chain. And again, that's where innovation can play a very, very big role. The intro note is by Mark Templeton and the discussion lead, Stephen Fick.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. All right, so there's no presentation, so I'm going to verbalize it. I'm from Scania, South Africa. I focus on sustainability, and I drive sustainability for Scania. I'm the main driver to bring new technology into the country, and I also chair the NEV committee of NAAMSA, and NEV stands for New Energy Vehicle Committee of NAAMSA. Cool. So I'm not going to go through a presentation in the true sense. Oh, I can't. I'll put it upside down. That will really work. So I'm going to talk through the slide first, and I'm talking to you as farmers and to logistics companies. Everybody's saying by 2050 we're going to be net zero. is that attainable, and is it really, and what impact is going to have on you, the farmer, and the transport operator? And we've looked at this about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was tasked by our local board and the Swedish board to look at the African content, and we believe that diesel will still be around by 2050. It'll be between 30 and 40% of the demand. Vehicles will still be running on diesel, and BEV will grow. BEV is battery electric vehicles, and it'll grow to roughly about 20, 25%, 30%. And why we do not believe it's going to be such a quick offtake is the cost of the BEV truck. So if a diesel truck is roughly 2 and a bit million rand, a BEV truck is about 5.5 million rand. So if you look at a TCO, total cost of ownership, and you try and amortize that over a life cycle of the truck, you never get a break even currently on BEV. Even with the cost of the fuel or the cost of the energy on BEV. You've got two solutions, either from Eskom or you go solar. So that's what I wanted to touch on. The other issues that we looked at is what is the solutions for here and now? And that is your biofuels, your biogases. So your biofuels is biodiesel in the sense. We spoke just before the meeting, there's a growing demand for biodiesels. And if you grow your own biodiesels, you control your cost of your fuel. And today the trucks you can run, all Scania engines can run on 100% biofuel going forward. And therefore the cost of biodiesel is but between 20 and 30% lower than not the new diesel price. I'm talking about the old diesel price of around 22, 23 litres, because the new price of 28, 29 rand is not a realistic price. So that just gives you a bit of an idea. The other issue that I want to touch on, I'm not going to go through the rest of the presentation, is the impact. Let me go back a slide. So what has got the biggest influence on fuel consumption in a truck? And 45% of your fuel consumption is linked to payload. 20%, at least 20% is linked to configuration. And then 15% is linked to driver behavior. And I think when we go into the discussion now, that is one of the most critical elements that everybody underestimates, how important the driver is in the process. So it's linked to fuel consumption, brake, engine, servicing. If you train your drivers correctly, you have lower maintenance costs, a longer operation time of the asset. And I think I'm going to cut it at that point. I'm going to hand over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. So I'm Stephen Fick. I'm farmer up in Limpopo, and joined my father about 10 years ago, and we're growing a vegetable and citrus business. And I appreciate the opportunity having this panel with me, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves. I think Mark already did, so we'll just carry on from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Norman Salia. I'm currently the Group CEO of the AFGRI Group. Willie asked me to give a little bit of personal background, but for 10 years before AFGRI, I was the CEO of Zedler Investments, and we were the controlling shareholder in Pioneer Foods, Capespan, the Logistics Group, Zaad Seed Company, Kaap Agri, Agrimarks, etc. So before my AFGRI days, I had a lot of exposure into most commodities and agriculture. My knowledge of the fresh produce industry, the Western Cape wheat industry, etc., at that stage grew and developed quite well. I come from Ermelo up north, so many of my family members are farmers. And for the last 5 years, I've been at the AFGRI Group. Arriving at AFGRI, many of you may know AFGRI, but it's a 103-year-old organization with business units that span the broad agri value chain. But we went through a very difficult time, and we finished the restructuring. And today, AFGRI is positioned as a partner for agribusiness. Our core business is grain. We're the largest storer of grain in the country, 5.5 million tons of grain storage capacity. We John Deere's largest dealer partner outside of America, so South Africa, Western Australia, East Africa from a John Deere portfolio perspective, animal feeds factories, independent animal feeds, milling. And then we've increasingly started focusing on the farmer's needs outside of just the raw commodities. And we've aggressively building data, technology and services that can ultimately benefit a farmer. So our main positioning is we are the farmer's ultimate partner, but partnering with banks and service providers to do that. My view is that if farmers aren't profitable, there is no sustainable food production industry, and that must be our focus. So participating in this panel in the context for that would be total cost of the chain, reducing it, et cetera, and getting it to a way that a farmer can profitably farm. Thanks.
Thanks.
One. Good day. Peter van Zyl. I head up procurement and buying for Fresh Market division of Shoprite Checkers in South Africa and in 7 African countries. We are, let's call it the buying, procurement and distribution arm, fruit and vegetable arm for the Shoprite Group. Portfolio I've been running for the past 22 years. So I've seen quite a couple of gravel roads and farms in my time.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Stefan Lagranci. I'm the managing director of a business called People. We deploy 10,500 people across various industries. And we're fully owned by DP World, which is a logistics provider, as you should know. My background is around supply chain optimization. I think through the past 15 years, looked at various clients, industries, where we make changes to a combination of people, process, and technology to unlock efficiency or to enhance throughputs. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So I think our session objective is to follow the potato from the pack house until the end user, and where we can find the inefficiencies and improve those inefficiencies to add value to the whole chain. So I think I'll start it off with the first question directed to Mark. What value can new truck technology add beyond fuel efficiency, and how can it reduce the total cost?
Lovely question. I get it every time. What value add can we look at from Scania's perspective? If I look at Scania, of 78% of all new trucks sold are linked to service contracts. And once you control the servicing of the truck from the OEM side, you control the quality of the maintenance, therefore you improve the efficiency, you reduce the downtime, and you increase the uptime for the operator. That's the first element. The second element is we also fund the trucks, and we've got a full view on how the customer operates, and we also help him in many ways. The third element that we add into it, which I touched on a bit earlier, is the importance of driver training. One of our major customers operates a fleet or a staff of more than 1,000 drivers, and more than 50% of his drivers go through Scania's driver training program. So let's define driver training. Driver training is not showing you how the truck operates. It's getting into the truck, driving with the driver, doing a route simulation, going out with the route, checking how the guy drives, making sure that he manages, he works within the parameters of the truck, and he also he knows how to drive the Scania truck. And that's not only for us, but it's for the other OEMs. And then finally, what we've also introduced, we've had it now in the country and globally for about since 2017, is an onboard facility. It's called now the C400. And that manages and measures 110 data points in the truck, from driver fuel efficiency, harsh braking, harsh acceleration, average speed, stop-start, idling, and I can go on for hours and hours. And when you put that all into the melting pot, it also gives you a driver score. So going back to that retailer, of that 1,000 plus drivers that they operate, their average driver score is about 77%. The standard across all the other C300s is below 50%. So that really indicates there's a massive skill shortage and a massive lack of focus on the importance of driver in maintaining your asset. So that's some of the elements that we bring to the party. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
If I can contribute to that, I think the technology that the OEMs brings to the party also helps with control tower optimization. So, I mean, the rich amount of data that comes from those vehicles enables us to identify exceptions. So if a driver is accelerating incorrectly or harsh braking, then we've got immediate access to that data, and it enables us to follow up with the driver and take action against the data that we've interpreted.
Okay, thank you. I think with the truck being technologically advanced, and so how can logistic providers and digital platforms improve truck turnaround time and vehicle utilization, coordination between farms? I think, Norman, we can direct this to you.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier, if you think about what is it that we're doing here, what's the point of it? And it reminds me of years back when I studied, there was a guy that said to me, there's only two ways of creating a sustainable competitive advantage in your business. You either have a highly differentiated product, in other words, all your time and energy is going into R&D or branding, you've got something that's different, or you got to accept you like many other people and you've got to have cost leadership. So the problem that we've got in agriculture, and I've seen this in citrus, we used to own the Outspan brand. And the Outspan brand used to be huge. And the Cricket World Cup, where Alan Donald and Lance Klusener ran each other out, you'll see Outspan everywhere. Today, it's gone. The ability to differentiate your product in commodities is tough. So you've got to understand that cost leadership ultimately is critical. And logistics is a massive part of the agricultural value chain. So every 1% and 0.5% and 1% and 0.5% eventually leads to a sustainable right to exist. So where our positioning at the moment is, as I said earlier, we need to make sure that farmers are profitable and sustainable, and that journey will involve a magnifying glass on logistics. There's no doubt about it. And on the one hand, you can have the equipment side, which is critically important, where OEMs are advancing at rates that we've never seen before. But on the other hand, there's just the general basics of planning well, visibility onto what the need is of the actual cargo that's got to move. And our positioning is to say to the farmer, how can we help you with tools and technology that at the source we can start the data and the planning better. So we're launching through AFGRI Logistics, we're launching farm loading apps at the moment. The ability for a farmer to at source already say, I've got this load, it needs to be picked up at this GIS location, and you start from there. Because the downstream bottlenecks, a lot of waste lies there. Sometimes you need 5 trucks because you need to wait 2 weeks at a silo in our case. Maybe you only need 1 truck or 2 trucks if you can schedule better. And so a lot of our focus is going on to the actual commodity at the farm side and start early planning, early visibility. So we are now linking in at the moment with 25,000 trucks on the roads live, all time, real-time data. And increasingly want to give the farmer and the producer visibility to that. What's available where? Maybe there's a truck coming right past your gate that's empty. And had you known it, he may have stopped and picked up your product, etc., rather than you waiting a week for a quote or something. So AFGRI's view in the long term is to try and come up with technology-enabled solutions. We're not the logistics provider, but we want to give the farmer visibility and insight into what's available so that ultimately the cost of logistics can come down. And bringing me back to the previous statement that cost leadership over time will make you sustainable. If not, you're going to run out of money.
I think that's such a valuable initiative that you're taking, specifically on that logistic leg from farm to delivery point. I think what can add lots of value is to supplement that with some demand feeds as well. I mean, if we think about the value chain from farm to fork, I mean, each of those nodes and movements should have data points that can be generated. So how do we aggregate all of the data to inform the flow? So I think ultimately, as we get more and more information flow from end to end, that's going to enable more and more product flow, efficient product flow, that's commercially, upside for all of the stakeholders.
Oh, thank you. I think that jumps into the next question where I, as a farmer, think we can harvest a potato and deliver it to a certain market in less than 24 hours. But from there, I think there can be a lot of bottlenecks that's not looked into. And if we optimize that part of the value chain, we can maybe stimulate more movement of product. An increased flow in product can create a little bit more demand. Peter, maybe I can ask you to jump in there.
Yeah, maybe from a retail perspective and maybe some exposure to the municipal markets. First, you need to understand what and where the demand is. Too little will be being done to understand the fact that consumers, if we look potato specific, we have about, in the group, because of the extra savings campaigns, we have about 8.7 million data points as a consumer. So let's call it fairly clear indication of demand and what the consumer expects. And we start our business there, and maybe that's where the growers should start it. Fact is that in, call it middle and upper LSM groups, a consumer buys more than 50% of their potato. The purchase happens on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And in the case of, on the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in the case of the lower income groups, it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So one should schedule its business to have stock available, thinking a day in advance for delivery. The bulk of potatoes should be in the market or at retail distribution centers on the Thursday and a Friday, because that's when you're going to service 50% of your orders going into the weekend. So no need, potatoes being harvested and put on a municipal market or in a distribution center on a Tuesday is going to stand a day or two or lose some time there because of the demand only being over the weekend. But where there's let's call it delay in delivery, or let's call it then from the harvest to distribution center or market in our life, it's all about demand planning. Reality in our life, or in a buyer in our organization's life, he sees a store order between 12 and 24 hours before we deliver it. So the rest is all forecasting. There's a lot of AI technology, experience, history that they can do demand planning. But if they get it wrong, they're either going to go short or they're going to sit on product for a couple of days because the demand isn't as they planned it. So that would delay it would delay potatoes getting to shelf. And the other big one is generally we have to do stock build for month ends, promotional periods, public holidays when growers don't work, weekends when growers don't work. We have to do stock build, and you'll find delays then from that product getting from the distribution center out to a store as well. So in general, from a grower's side maybe, or then what the ask would, I think, is from the industry is that maybe addressing capacity and packing and harvest capacity and align that with where the demand is. Reality is that the demand, not only on potatoes, but potatoes specifically, some other commodities is small. We have a drop in the middle 2 weeks of a month. We have a 30% drop in demand.
Sure.
So, for argument's sake, 1,000 ton demand over month end or SASA weeks. That's the reality of South Africa today. Government payout around the 15th. In the past, you had about a 2 or 3 week, let's call it, up in normal demand around mid-month. That's now 1 day. Actual day of the 15th, we see a bit of a spike in demand. But then from the 25th, when the first people get paid, till the last day of the grants, which moves every month, and maybe a day or two after grant payouts, that's where the peak of your demand is. Mm-hmm. From a grower point of view, and I know it's not always possible, but in a perfect world, we would harvest less and market less in the middle of the month, so that demand and availability sort of matches, and month ends we would up our business and gear our business to put those additional volumes through, so that we can service the customer better. And then obviously and in a perfect world from a retailer point of view, we deliver to our stores 7 days a week. So all stores get a delivery every day of the week. Our business operates 365 days of the year. Most of our big distribution centers run 23 hours a day, inbound and outbound from a stock point of view. But we don't necessarily in all industries have growers delivering to us on Saturdays and Sundays and Mondays if they don't harvest over a weekend. So in a perfect world, if I can get a delivery of potatoes every day of the week, it's literally, if I get a delivery this morning, the first stock goes into stores from 10 o'clock tonight, the stores that goes on night receiving. So it can be less than 48 hours from harvest to shelf if everybody did their part.
Okay. Now, I understand this is quite a complex redistribution of product after it reaches a distribution center or market or whatever. I'm just thinking maybe we can talk a bit about how we can maybe gather some data, because it's quite complex the way product moves from a municipal market to an end user in a township or anywhere else. I think it's quite complex and not as easy to gather that data, but I don't know, maybe Stefan, you have some input there.
Yeah, I think if I understand you correctly, there's still pockets of immaturity in the network. I think the practical approach would be to look at where do you currently generate data. So, I mean, if it's at the grower, if it's through transporters and all of the data that's made available through truck technology, I think platforms like AFCRI that can show us all of that data up to the market. The challenge then becomes to convince the market on how will they generate data. What type of data do they have available to you in terms of their client information, who they sell to. Ultimately, those clients' information must be supplemented with where they sell. Where does that hawker sit and sell? Because if we can ultimately go and understand the heat map of all of the demand across South Africa, that will give us good information on either advanced forecasting for planning up front, or also to know where should we be relocating inventory per day of the week, per week of the month, to understand where do we put the stock so that we can get the best price for it and so that it can flow to the end consumer.
Yeah.
So I think a practical approach, be pragmatic around it. Obvious start would be to map this thing from end to end. Go and understand what are the typical technologies being used. What's the process being applied? What's the best in class processes that we can all learn from each other? And that should at least give us a picture of where should we start focusing? Who should we go and convince to further supplement this value chain with valuable information?
Okay. Anyone else want to add on that?
Yeah, I think there's this explosion of data happening all around us in all our lives and worlds, and to make sense of it all is sometimes a very, very big challenge. Our focus at the moment is producer to primary point of delivery, call it an industrial type of or a DC thing. In AFCRI specific, we haven't gone that further step to the actual end consumer as much, and I think in the informal markets that's quite tricky. I know when we were selling eggs in Zambia, there was a Zambian person that I thought was so innovative. He went around with an iPad and he went to stand at every place that he thought would be a distribution point, be it a little bucky or be it somebody's home, and etc. And eventually had this network of shops, informal shops, that he came and he said, yeah, you can go and sell your eggs. And we had a business called Mega Eggs. And it was incredible. We then route mapped his shops and sent a truck, and the truck would drive, and, lo and behold, there was a shop. And they would take eggs, etc. And we started mapping out routes in Zambia because some entrepreneur had the idea of an iPad and a GIS location as they drove around. So I don't know how you get to the end data, but if it is the end seller in a informal community, maybe there's an opportunity for someone.
I think that sounds like a brilliant idea, because I think the whole potato market is driven around perspective, whether there's enough product, not enough product, too much product coming. And I think if we can try and distribute it a little bit better, increase the efficiency in distributing, and maybe deliver, like you said, that entrepreneur in specific locations on specific times, we can reduce pressure on bottlenecks and try and increase product movement. Okay, great.
Sorry, I'd like to add something in. It's quite interesting. I attended a conference, and one of the big retailers got up there and he was presenting how the company had performed. I'm not prepared to mention his name. And from the audience, I asked, "What is your business, retail or IT?" And he looked at everybody and he said, IT. And what has made the big retailers very successful is their IT platforms. So it's a cornerstone of the way we are going in the future to make businesses more successful. Sorry, I just had to add that.
No, thanks, Mark. Yeah, I just want to direct a question maybe to Peter Norm again. What would allow a buyer to trust that the potatoes delivered match the stated grade or quality? I think maybe Peter, Norman, you can, and with your knowledge in the grain industry.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, and I did admit this earlier. Potato is the industry I probably don't know the best. But, we explored ways of doing what the SAFEX market does to grain and the sugar markets and the soft commodity markets. We explored that in the fresh produce industry, and I know there's a couple of initiatives in South Africa at the moment along that way. And in the end, we struggled because the perishable nature of the product we found in table grapes, for example, we would have the best container of table grapes packed in Uppington, and we would send that across to Tesco in the UK. Their buyer would fly out, be on the farm, pick it, and go back, but still not want to make a price. They wanted that thing packed, shipped, arrived in the UK, opened the container, looked with their own eyes, and then they would sign off on the price. And we ended up shipping blind around the world. It was very risky business. And so that to me is the one extreme of a perishable product. And then I suppose potato is kind of, it's not grain, it's not table grapes, it's kind of somewhere in the middle. And it does go through my mind whether or not over time there would either be a trust between the producer and the buyer, and that trust can build and grow, and your brand may be the fact that you always give a trusted product. And then with some photo capability or load verification at the point of loading and the trust, I think there could be an increase in the level of trust and product quality and grading at the point of transaction. I can't see it happening in table grapes and blueberries yet, but it's already happening in grain and sugar, anything that's non-perishable, it's already happening. So there's a grade, if you don't perform, insurance even pays out. But I suppose potatoes lies somewhere in the spectrum. But again, with data and technology, I really think it's coming quite soon. So I think a producer that has a brand, consistent quality, delivers as they promise, I think could get to a point where there's a level of trust in the product and the quality, but maybe that'll be more for Peter to say whether that's even possible.
Yeah, maybe if you, let's say technology is going to be the bigger advantage there. We run we've got a product's specification for each of the product we do. On potatoes, we follow we follow what, let's call the class 1 or class 2, depends on which product we are packing for which of our markets or for which of our customers. So the quality standard and the size standard is generally on a product specification would be what you are packing for class 1 and class 2, and within the sizes. So it's important that in our life that the supplier and ourselves understand the specification, because in some cases, let's take that as example, there's quite a big variance in the size specification from, let's call it medium and large meat. So there's a bottom end of the spec and there's a top end. So there is cases, potatoes and onions are one of them, where our demand within a medium, we would cut out a percentage of the smaller size because we don't want the very small medium. So, but that's agreed between us and suppliers. So it's very important that as a starting point that you and whoever supplies the product agree on the quality standard. Then the technology is there because we, at our point of receiving all the distributions, we run centers, we run on a UK program it's called Mighty Boots. It's all digital, tablet driven. So the product specification is loaded there. It's got the capacity to take photos. Should there be any deviations, we can do positive, negative verification. And that's all live once I've accepted it. The grower would hear nothing more of me. And if there's a problem, the grower gets an automated, let's call it QC inspection, that there's an issue. That program has the ability to do positive verification on farm. And we already have a trial going of some growers in the Western Cape where positive verification happens on the farm. So they employ the same program. They would employ a quality person that inspects the product on farm when it's dispatched, and we take it in. It runs straight through the system, so it doesn't get stopped at the back door, barring checking quantities received is what we are invoiced for. Thing there is, one, we audit the system and their system, where we regularly go out to the farm, make sure QCs are still trained up, they're doing it correct, and then we at times do a stop and just check that what the farmer said is done. Is correct. But in that channel, it's very important that the traceability applied is correct. So we focus not only on the normal marking requirements like potatoes, its size and class and address. So we want to know field that it is packed, day it was harvested is indicated, pack line that was used is indicated. So if we on shelf now, we get to a store and there's a problem with a product that came through that system, we can trace it back and identify where the problem is and correct it. So technology can help you to save, and the programs are there. But in time, as Norman said, it's a supplier builds up the trust. If we audit on the farm that these processes are still in place, if we do our spot checks every now and then of a load and nothing is wrong, it's perfect. The system works well. And in some cases, it doesn't go as smooth, and you suddenly you find that, oh, we've done a spot check, we have a problem, we're on shelf, and we find a problem with a certain grower's east. Then you sort of lose your credibility and the whole system falls flat, and you again have a delay in the chain because now suddenly product is checked on the farm, checked in the distribution center as well, which just delays the whole process. So it's about your supplier reputation and the trust in the relationship. That's very important. Okay. But it's possible. It's very, very possible to almost cut out that one QC check in between Madam Customer and the farm, if everybody does their part.
Okay. Stefan?
I was just listening now in terms of tracing a specific unit from where it's produced down to market. And in certain cases, we use through a control tower, we get visibility through these small tags that you buy for R1 or R2. And it's Bluetooth enabled. It's like the iTags that you get that picks up the nearest Bluetooth signal. And that sticker of R1 or R2 can be put on a product, and it's going to show you where it lands. So that'll take it throughout the whole process. If that little sticker is tied to a specific batch or order that comes into a retail DC, that will give you traceability of that stock. So I think between that, RFID, so RFID is more reusable technology, but there's various solutions that could supplement that data into the value chain.
Okay,
So I think it's a
that's
possibility.
very interesting. So Stefan, I'm going to stay with you now. Is how can the potato industry move from this fragmented data to connect it to the whole value chain? How can we put all, because we spoke about a lot of different points and a lot of different data capturing points, but is there a way we can innovate a thread through everything?
I think, and it's maybe what I already mentioned, is that for me it's important to go and understand the baseline. So what is this value chain? How can we go and map it, understand people, process, and technology in play, and even go further to understand the costs per each of these nodes, do activity-based costing. That gives you a view across industry of what is the current standard. From there, if you go and simulate changes to this network, it's going to give you those optimization potential or business case to go and invest, to go and look at what technology, relevant technology, not just the sake of having technology, what relevant technology will produce those measurable outcomes that you can apply changes to. And then put that on a timeline, project plan. I think throughout the value chain, the challenge is always that collaboration. I mean, everyone's protecting his own, piece of sun. It's going to take change management. I think if you can put a business case in place and use that to go and back your argument on trying to convince the next supply chain partner, it gives you something in hand to work towards a future optimized end-to-end network.
Okay, no, thank you. Anyone else want to add on that?
Yeah, I was asking the question earlier this morning, how long can you store a potato? What's the technology needed to store it? Because I know in like the apple industry, for example, and the avo industry, they even harvest when it's green, they, put it to sleep in CA rooms, they wake it up over time. We sold avos into China at one stage, and those ripening facilities there are eye-wateringly large. So farmers are actually harvesting, shipping. They arrive, they put them to bed, they wake them up, and they put them on the shelf fresh. So I often wonder whether, I was asking the question earlier, what's happening in America and around the world in terms of large-scale potato storage. My understanding is that we're a country that loves fresh more than anywhere else, and so clean and white is preferred. And if you're in those markets, it's probably a slightly more stale product. But I do think that maybe there's a little bit of thinking that can go in there. And what is the technology of large industrial storage technology that can assist with a logistic cost and value chain, like grains in silos, etc. But I'm going to certainly try and do some research on that one.
Okay, no, thanks, Norman. And then how can growers, packhouses, logistic providers, markets and buyer optimize the complete value chain rather than the individual parts in isolation? It's directed to the whole panel open.
I think my view is start with where your product's going to end and work back. If it's a logistics value chain, be very clear what the end point is and then work back. Because I think a lot of the inefficiencies comes from supply-driven push and then bottlenecks. Maybe in the wrong places, maybe at the wrong times, as you say, Tuesdays, Thursdays. At the end of the day, it's a demand-driven world. It's a commodity. Somebody's eating it at some point in time, somewhere. And I think working back from that will take inefficiencies out of the chain.
Yeah, I think trying to solve within silos, so each of the nodes of the value chain, often creates big problems. I mean, because if you solve on the one side, then there's a problem that pops up on the other side. So you essentially just move the inefficiencies out to the next person. So I think it's valuable what Norman said. It's important to understand where does the demand pull from. Like I said earlier, if we can understand exactly in the market where's this heat map of demand and place products right place, right time, right quality. That's the ideal future of how this network should be managed.
Yeah, I think this last question is almost consolidating, but we maybe answered most of it. Is if we are designing a world-class potato value chain from scratch, what would we do differently? And what is the first practical step that we can take in using systems and organizations we already have?
Sure.
It's actually not an easy question. If you look at the data that's available in the market, and it's problem they're all in silos, is to really look at consolidation of that data into some, we spoke a bit earlier about it, into some consolidated system. And from there, putting it together and pulling it apart and then identifying everything in that supply chain, from the optimization of the vehicle to supply to the end user. The data is here, but nobody's sitting together and really pulling that together. I think from my perspective, I see that as a massive opportunity, but it's going to be a nightmare. I nearly put a word in front of nightmare, but it's a nightmare. and it's also IP, and the biggest risk is the IP. People are so protective about their IP, so how you get around that, that's a discussion for another day.
So I think as Norman also mentioned, we're literally sitting in data overload.
Yes.
There's so much data everywhere around. So you can aggregate everything. You can find the best insights from it. But at the end of the day, it's a person. It's a person running a network. So you need buy-in. I think change management throughout this value chain, everyone's protective of his own peace in the sun. You know, it's that for me is a real challenge. That's the biggest challenge of, even if we've solved the data side and the technology side.
The one thing I will add is I often speak to my kids too. I mean, the era of data and technology, in my mind, is the era of disintermediation. So the person that ultimately uses something, and the consumer, and the person who actually builds something and makes something, they'll be around 1,000 years from today. But in the middle, there's a rapid disintermediation. And I think to be a producer of something is very sustainable. You know, to take something out of the earth and have a potato, or to eat a potato, that's not going to disappear. But everything in between is a rapid race. I don't know who's going to win that race, but it's data, tech, it's apps, and it's coming. So the middlemen are going to struggle, in my opinion, in the long term. I think anyone that's ultimately touching the consumer and anyone that's producing. And then, you know, your question was, how do we build an ideal value chain in between? But I think, you know, being a producer, and a large producer that grows and scales and has a lowest cost of operation, and getting to the end consumer, that's the journey.
So what Norman is actually saying is you must just cut out the middleman.
No, I'm saying
where we're going.
To the retailer.
I'm saying the level of innovation that's coming in the middle channel is phenomenal.
In the perfect world, all commodities, including potatoes, should be farmed from the, let's call it, from the shelf backwards, and not from the farm. We shouldn't be sitting here producing without knowing where our product goes and what our demand is. We shouldn't be putting potatoes in the marketplace when there's no demand. We shouldn't have too little when there's actually demand. So working basically from the kitchen back, and that's demand planning. And part of that, call it information and data points, would be, what does the customer actually want? And what volumes, in which time of the week. Most people buy potatoes between 12 and 4 on average, for interest sake. Anyway, so you should have your potatoes available 12 to 4 on average in the day. Anyway, so the issue is we produce and then we sell. We should know what and how many to produce, and try and organize ourselves to produce the demand. Then you will take the peaks and the valleys out of pricing and all the issues that goes with that.
Just on that, you remind me of something now. I was in America in the wine industry, and they tried to measure market share and shelf life. And Walmart and Sam's Club, the largest two retailers, they actually measure share of throat, they call it. Because they say it doesn't help you put everything, if it's not going down a throat, it's got no value. And so if it's overproduced, they literally refer to the liters per throat in the US, what goes down people's throats in a year, in a month. And then from that perspective, they plan, is it water, is it Coke, is it wine, is it beer? Because there comes a point where it can't go anywhere else. So it reminded me a little bit of demand planning, you know, so many people eating so many, when, and what's the market share?
Yeah, I think that ties a little bit into one of my earlier questions, as to how do we determine, because in a retail space where you have data and it's quite easy, or not easy, but it's determinable, how much is moving when and how much we need to produce. But if that is only a fragment of the total volume move, how do we measure that in the informal sector where, say, 40 or 50% of the produce is going? How can we plan backwards from there? I think that's a real challenge on the farmer side. We don't know how to determine that metric.
And it's the same challenge for all vegetable commodities, because the bulk of that is onions. Tomatoes get sold on municipal markets or direct to independents or off the farm. You won't have that data point. In potatoes, between us and formal retail, that's about 15% of buys about 15% of the share. You're just going to see what people buy in our stores. And reality is that the informals because of that big market share of the informal sector and small independent spaza shops or whatever, in our life, ShopRite and USAFE, where let's say the bulk of potato consumption happens in that middle to lower income segment, only 46% of our consumers buy potatoes on our ShopRite and USAFE stores. So they buy other stuff, but they don't buy a potato on shelves. So they, even though they frequent our stores, still don't buy a potato. Now, so our challenge is obviously to engage and get that customer into our store to buy potatoes. But even in for people that frequent formal retail, half still buys on the street.
But that challenge to get visibility of what we deem main market, and I know the beverage industry also talk about main market. We've also found a big challenge to do the demand planning, and how are you going to move in there and actually plan routing, scheduling efficiently there. What we have seen changing in the past 10 years, I've had some dealings with BAT at that time, selling cigarettes. And some fintech companies started moving into the informal traders that provides a point of sales machine. And that machine does all of the inventory. So, I mean, it helps them to manage the inventory, do the sales, and it generates data from the main market. So I do believe that, moving away from cash, moving to cards, moving to point of sale, I mean, the technology flowing into the informal areas will back us to within the next 10 years, we'll have access to data.
Okay. No, I think that wraps everything up. I think the cheapest chain is not necessarily the one with the lowest price at individual stages. It is the chain with the fewest unnecessary movements and the shortest delays, the least repeated handling and the best information. So I say thank you, and I want to open the floor for any questions to some of the panelists. So yeah, you're welcome. Is there anyone?
Over there. Have somebody got a microphone?
A question to Peter. We were talking about demand, and we know if we can sell more or there's a higher demand for potatoes, we can plant more. So how do we create more demand in the market? It's a bit of a curveball. It's not part of but you being from Freshmore.
In formal retail, you create demand by planting less and having higher prices. As strange as it sounds, because it's just tongue-in-cheek. If there's less potatoes on the informal market, people tend to have to buy in the retail, and that generally happens when prices are quite high. So it's actually quite funny that a retailer would say high prices equals better business. But that's reality when you trade in a commodity like potatoes. From customer data, maybe just a bit more realistic, from customer data, the focus of the industry should be on our Gen Zs, under 30 consumers. They are currently the smallest, it's called the least consuming potato segment. That 30 to 60-year-old bracket currently accounts for about 70 to 75% of potatoes being consumed in formal retail. So I can only answer for formal retail. Our issue is that younger generation. So today we still have potato eaters because they're between 30 and 60 years old. What we should be asking ourselves in the next 20 years, who's going to be eating our potatoes, because they that are currently in 20 years going to be there are not eating our potatoes. And we, meaning retail and industry, need to find ways to either get the right message through to consumers, to have potatoes on shelf, how they eat it or why they should consume it, why it should be part of the plate, because a plate starts with a protein, be that a vegetable protein or meat protein, but that's a meal gets built around protein. So we need people, and especially young people, to eat more potatoes. I think we're blessed in South Africa with fresh potatoes every day. So it's not like the rest of the world where it's stored and you lose some taste, you lose some of the sugars and the starches as it's built. I already think in general we give the customer value, good product that they consume. Now it's just why should they eat potatoes? And that I can't answer you. I can't answer you why they should. I know why it's on my plate because I enjoy it. I think that's an age-old question. Since the start of the industry, every symposium and every regional meeting I've been in is how we're going to get people to eat more potatoes. It's definitely not in cheap prices for a retailer, that I can tell you. For the rest of the consumers, for sure. Somebody had to eat all the potatoes that was produced in the last 12 months, and that magnitude more that was in the same period, the couple of years before that. So price did help for some of the consumers that may be added to the plate, but it shouldn't be the be-all and end-all, shouldn't be affordability. It's value for money.
Maybe just to add to that, beforehand we had a little bit of a discussion outside, and I'm just going to share some. I was at the John Deere R&D conference the other day, and obviously they have equipment across every single production system in the world, and a couple of things happening in demand profiles, which is worth noticing. I mean, I was saying earlier, it doesn't take you more than 15 minutes on the internet to know that there's a starch-carb kind of reconsideration of diets around the world. In America alone, just the introduction of Ozempic GLP-1 injections, they project will have a 25% reduction in corn production, 25% of the world's largest producer of corn. Not just in demand, in consumption drop, but also in a change of consumption. Corn syrups going into every single cool drink in the US, every single box of cornflakes, whatever it may be. So that whole industry has got to reconsider its consumption per capita. The innovation coming in the US is phenomenal in that space. Otherwise, the arable cropping industry is under pressure. And we're dealing with old commodities here. I mean, wheat and barley and maize and potatoes have been around since biblical times. So I think there's a level of maturity around the world in terms of what's produced and what's consumed. Whereas some of the superfoods are going, people are using maybe a little bit of blueberries per day, and they're maybe going to grow at 300% consumption. But I think in our large, stable commodity markets, we've probably got to face the fact that consumption per person may not go up as much as what we were hoping for. Hence the cost efficiency on supply chain and everything being so important. So I don't know how to sell. I know in my house, potato consumption has gone down. If I look at our life in the last 15, 20 years, it's gone down a little bit. But I don't know what the broader demand profile looks like.
Okay.
We could have ended the talk on a positive.
Was that negative? No, it wasn't meant to be. Supply chain.
Okay, no, thanks.
Any other questions?
Any other questions from the floor? I think we have time for one more. I
think maybe just the last thing to mention that I forgot to mention is that in the space of coordinated data and visibility across the industry, some teams within DP World and Willie has done some good work around a control tower as such with the application. So if you guys have any questions around that, please go and chat to Willie or his team.
Okay. Oh, thanks. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the whole panel.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
I know you were missing my hat, right? So decided to put on a hat again. And a great crop is not enough. The value chain must be as smart as the farm. Now, something that was upsetting to me is when my surname was mentioned, when they said, my surname is Middle, and they said, cut out the middleman. So that was quite hurtful. Just to mention, the DP World Control Towers is now live on the Potatoes SA app. So Outside, there's a team, the regional team can assist you if you really want to look at the technology. It's fantastic. So really make use of that. And this session wasn't possible without the sponsor, Nile and Nature's Garden. So we really like to thank them for sponsoring this. And here's their video. Thanks.
Welkom by Nile. Boere werk dag en nag om vars produkte te produseer wat ons almal nodig het om te floreer. Maar om hulle oeste te bemark, kan duur en ondoeltreffend wees. Dit is omdat boere oor klimaatstreke versprei is en hulle produkte oes gedurende verskillende seisoene, wat dit moeilik maak om te bepaal waar die beste markte vir hulle produkte is. Dit is waarom ons Nile begin het. Nile verseker 'n beter toekoms vir varsprodukverhandeling deur boere direk te verbind met kopers wat die grootste vraag vir hulle produk het. Ons aanlyn markplek digitaliseer transaksies wat boere bevoordeel deur laer kommissies wat winsgewendheid verhoog en vinniger betalings wat kontantvloei verbeter. Nile verseker ook dat boere meer beheer het oor hulle pryse en skep toegang tot nuwe kopers in groter markte. Ons logistieke netwerk verseker dat vars produkte kopers kan bereik oor die kortste moontlike afstande. Boere kan direk aan kopers lewer deur hul eie vervoer gebruik of Nile se logistieke vennote gebruik te maak. Alternatiefelik kan produkte deur Nile se konsolidasie hubs na kopers gestuur word. Aanvraag op die Nile markplek hou aan groei, soos kopers meer bewus raak van die voordele van aanlyn verhandeling. Hierdie voordele sluit in direkte toegang tot meer as 50 vars produk-kategorieë van Afrika se voorste boere. Lang raklewe omdat die koue ketting beheer word en hantering beperk word. Laer kostes aangesien tussengangers uitgeskakel word. Nile is die toekoms van varsprodukverhandeling. Ons nooi jou uit om by ons aan te sluit. Nile.ag